No one could have predicted that the very creatures so often dismissed as wild and untamable would become the difference between life and death. On a blistering afternoon deep in the Arizona desert, former Delta Force operator turned Border Patrol agent Riley Monroe hung helplessly off a jagged cliff, betrayed and abandoned, her future measured by the fraying of a single rope. There was no signal, no backup, no hope until a band of wild Mustangs emerged from the shimmering heat, and everything changed. At the southern edge of Border Patrol Sector 7, nobody really remembered when Riley first showed up. She didn't come with flair or ceremony, just a duffel bag slung over one shoulder, desert boots, and that haunted, hollow look of someone who'd survived more than they should have. The whispers started immediately. Some called her the ghost, not just because of how quietly she moved through the compound, but because of her past off which no one knew the full story. What few knew, and she never confirmed, was that Riley Monroe had once been Staff Sergeant Monroe, a Delta Force commando with tours across Iraq, Afghanistan, and a string of high-value operations that had earned her medals and scars in equal measure. But none of that mattered anymore. The last stop had been a disaster. Internal betrayal. A mission compromised. Her team wiped out in a matter of hours. She had walked away physically intact, but her soul, not so much. When she returned stateside, there was no place for her in the world of high-stakes special warfare. She wasn't cut out for boardrooms or teaching tactics to fresh recruits. She needed space, silence, a chance to lose herself in work that felt real. That's how she ended up patrolling the deadliest, dustiest stretches of the U.S.-Mexico border where, if people died, it wasn't buried in bureaucracy. It mattered. She was 3 months into the assignment when the patrol chief, a grizzled former ranger named Hector Shaw, called her into his cramped office with a grimace and a manila folder. "There's a stretch out near Canyon de Rosa." GPS chatter picked up something strange: thermal spikes, maybe traffic, or maybe just desert ghosts. "You want it?" Riley nodded once. Solo recon was her comfort zone. No chatter, no second-guessing. Half an hour later, she was roaring across the desert on her patrol bike, the sun barely up and the air already heavy with heat. The terrain out near De Rosa was brutal, sharp rock formations, bone-dry arroyos, and winds that carved the sand into shifting traps. Perfect for smugglers looking to slip through unnoticed. She had barely reached the outskirts of an old abandoned ranger station when something in the air shifted. Instinct screamed, but before she could react, a blunt force struck the back of her skull. She woke bound and bleeding, her hands cinched behind her back, her gear gone, and 3 masked men jeering in clipped Spanish. Her weapons lay discarded on the sand. The tallest of them mocked her with a sneer. "This is the elite border patrol?" He laughed. "I expected more fight." One held a pistol to her forehead. She didn't blink, didn't flinch. Her heart hammered, but she refused to let them see fear. The leader waved the gun away. "No bullets," he said coldly. "Too loud, too easy. Let the sun finish her." They dragged her, kicking and gasping, to a narrow outcropping where the desert cracked open into a steep canyon. Without ceremony, they looped a coarse rope around her midsection, hoisted her over the edge, and left her dangling 30 feet above jagged stone. Her arms still bound. The rope creaked with every gust of wind. Every second could be her last. Time became a haze. Her mouth turned to dust. Her limbs throbbed with fire. Above her, there was only sun and silence. No one was coming. But then the silence broke. A faint sound, hooves impossibly drawing closer. Riley thought she was hallucinating. But through the blinding glare, shapes took form. Horses. Wild. Unshod. Untamed. The leader among them, a coal-black Mustang with a jagged scar across its shoulder, approached the ledge. It didn't bolt at the scent of blood or the unfamiliar sight of a human. It watched her, listened, and then, incredibly, began to nudge the rope. Riley was too weak to speak, too close to unconsciousness to cry out. But the black Mustang persisted, nudging, then gripping the rope in its teeth, pulling. 2 others joined, a russet mare and a gray stallion. Together, They formed a strange triad of instinctual precision, coordinating without a single word. She felt herself rise. Inch by agonizing inch, her body lifted towards safety. The horses strained. The rope groaned. But they didn't stop. And somehow miraculously Riley reached the edge. She collapsed, shaking, barely able to breathe. The black Mustang stood over her, watching, waiting. "Thank you," she rasped, tears stinging her eyes. "Sable. That's your name. You're Sable." She didn't know why she said it, only that it fit. Back at the outpost, when Riley staggered through the gates half carried by the same black Mustang that had saved her, the station exploded into chaos. Medics rushed her to the infirmary. Bloody, dehydrated, and hovering near shock, she whispered the name Sable again and again until sleep took her. The Mustang didn't leave. Sable waited outside the compound fence all night, unmoving, unafraid. Agents approached with caution. Food, water, gentle words. But he responded to none of them, only to Riley. As she recovered, details unraveled like loose threads. The patrol map she'd used had been forged. Her mission route falsified. Supervisor Shaw's signature adorned the request, but it wasn't his handwriting. The logs had been tampered with. Someone had wanted her dead. Riley and Agent Myra Calder, who'd once worked cyber ops before transferring to the field, began piecing it together. Someone inside had collaborated with a cartel cell, fed them patrol schedules, deleted camera logs, created blind zones in the mapping system. And Riley silent, precise Riley had wandered into a trap set just for her. Shaw, her commanding officer, was the keystone. He'd masked his betrayal under a weathered face and calm demeanor. When they confronted him with the forged documents and backdoor server logins, he didn't deny it. He didn't need to. He went for his weapon. But Riley was faster. The compound plunged into chaos that night. A blackout. A team of hired mercs slipped through the southern fence. Gunfire echoed down the halls. Panic rippled through the agents as the generators failed. And in the middle of it all, Sable charged the courtyard. He trampled one gunman, kicked another into unconsciousness, and threw himself into the firefight with a wild fury that defied logic. Riley, limping and bleeding from reopened wounds, found herself pinned under Shaw's gun, but Sable slammed into him mid-stride, taking a bullet meant for her. Riley neutralized Shaw, handcuffed him, and then crawled to Sable's side as the Mustang collapsed in a pool of blood. He survived. Barely. A veterinary team arrived within the hour. They worked through the night. Riley never left his side, whispering through the pain, willing the horse back to life. When he finally stirred, nuzzling weakly against her chest, the entire station let out a breath. The story spread fast. Media, politicians, animal behaviorists. They called Sable everything from a guardian spirit to a tactical marvel. But Riley refused the spotlight. She stayed in the shadows, tending to Sable, rebuilding her strength. Weeks passed. Carver faced federal trial. Dozens of agents were suspended, some arrested. New protocols were introduced. But Riley had other plans. She submitted a proposal, Echo Mustang Recon, a joint initiative to partner, not domesticate, with wild Mustangs, capable of navigating terrain inaccessible to vehicles or drones. Not as pets, not as property, as equals. If a horse chose to stay, to walk beside them, they would train together. If not, they were free to go. To everyone's surprise, the program was approved. Riley and Sable began training together. Over time, other horses approached the compound. Some watched from afar. A few ventured closer. And slowly, a strange new unit began to take shape. Not soldiers and mounts. Allies. Sentinels. Watchers of the desert. One fog-draped morning, weeks after Sable had wandered off on one of his unscheduled scouting missions, he returned silent and resolute, emerging from the mist like a myth. Riley smiled, her hand resting on his shoulder. "Welcome back," she whispered, and then she mounted up, turning toward the horizon, the sun rising at her back. Together, they vanished into the dunes. Not as legend, but as fact. A ghost and a Mustang. watching the border silent, tireless, and unbreakable.